Okay, let's bring in the results and the weekend's table. So here we go. City beat Everton 3-1. Palace beat Leicester by a goal to nil. Huddersfield beaten at home by Newcastle. Spurs beat Burnley 1-0. Watford beat Cardiff 3-2. A bit of drama in that game, late drama there. Wolves, again, decent against Bournemouth. Fulham 0, West Ham 2. Things not going great for Claudio Ranieri. Not entirely predictable. Yes, it was. Brighton 1, Chelsea 2. Southampton beat Arsenal 3-2. Same old Arsenal, we'll be asking in just a minute. And Liverpool beat Manchester United by 3-1. So all that results in the table looking a bit like this. Fulham rooted to the bottom. Huddersfield and Burnley still in the relegation zone. Southampton, after their remarkable win under their new manager, are out of the relegation zone. Cardiff, Palace, Newcastle are the next three in order there, and there's a bit of a gap up to Brighton at the top. Obviously, Liverpool, as Nathan said, a point clear of Manchester City, 6 clear of Spurs, and 8 clear of Chelsea, with Arsenal now dropping 3 points behind the top 4. And Manchester United on 26 points, 11 points behind Champions League qualification as it stands at the moment. Gary Breen, good morning to you. How you doing?
Very well. Good morning, guys.
So, this Liverpool performance, this Liverpool season, they're a real team. This is like an absolutely sensational achievement that they have reached to this point. And we all have these doubts about whether or not they're going to be able to keep it going. But maybe we should stop doubting and just enjoy this for what it is.
Well, no, listen, I think a lot of Liverpool fans will think they've been in this scenario before and it's petered out. But this is a very different Liverpool team. There's no doubt about it. When you think about how they used to blitz teams last season, they're so much more controlled now. They dominate games. You never feel that when the opposition gets within a goal that they're going to lose the game, drop points. Even when United got it back to 1-1, you always felt that Liverpool were never going to lose it. It was just whether or not United could keep them out as such. But with the quality of the options, as you guys rightly said about Shaqiri coming off the bench, they can win games all different types of way, and that bodes well. That suggests that this is potentially a title-winning team.
Yeah, one of the other things that happened at the weekend, now it's only the social media pockets, Man United fans saying that they would much prefer to have had the era that Jose Mourinho has brought to Manchester United and the trophies that he has won versus what the hell has Jurgen Klopp done for Liverpool. But I mean, I kind of think that doesn't understand what the point of being a sports fan is. You're supposed to love the team, you're supposed to love the sport, you're supposed to love watching them and be excited by them or scared of them or something. You're supposed to feel alive. There's no way that anybody who's a Man United fan feels alive watching this team at the moment.
Well, no, listen, they're getting a taste of their own medicine, having it so good in the early part of the Premier League season, history as such. But Jurgen Klopp, I know that Mourinho made a point, in fact, going into the game that trophies matters, and of course they do. But he's galvanised that club. He's not only grabbed the attention of the players, everyone aside, but the whole city, it seems, and they're a joy to watch. They really are. He's created not only that type of atmosphere, but now a squad capable of challenging and getting that elusive Premier League title. Jose Mourinho, you're right. You bring Jose Mourinho in as a serial winner, and it was in contrast to the attacking philosophy of Manchester United's history as such. And that was a big question, and it was divided. Even when he first came in, a lot of United fans felt he wasn't the type of manager they wanted. But we are very surprised at the drop that they're so far behind now. We're talking about a club now whose ultimate ambition is to finish 4th. That was at Manchester United when I played against them. If they finished 2nd, it was a disaster.
Yeah, it's very interesting as well looking at the comments that Jose Mourinho makes after the game. You always wonder who he's going to blame next. And the one about Liverpool's fitness and their pace is probably the one that stuck out to me the most. So he talks about Robertson, Mane, Salah, Wijnaldum, Keita and Fabinho. They are physical players. On top of that, they are good technically. I have lots of good players technically, but we do not have that intensity or that physicality. Is that something you agree with?
Well, the biggest surprise for me there is his use, and he's normally so good in terms of what words he uses, but to suggest that he doesn't have the physicality when he's recruited the likes of Bailly, Mata, Pogba, Lukaku to give him the type of physicality that was so dominant on his title-winning teams at Chelsea, when you think of that spine. But what has been proved over the last 18 months is that type of physical presence in there just cannot cope with the movement, the fluidity of not only Liverpool, but Manchester City. So it's as if he's had a remit and he's going to have to rip it all up now and go a completely different way, which is in total contrast to all these teams that have been successful in the past.
Because the idea of the qualities in the players, you can often say that that's an independent thing from the management. But is it really? Like, he was speaking about his Porto team as well, saying that the qualities of the players were there, that it was his best team in defensive transition, he says, that Porto team, that they bit like mad dogs, to use the exact quote. He spoke about Real Madrid and the best direct counter-attacking team they had. And he talks about the Inter Milan team in a low block. You can be 5 hours and don't concede a goal. So players make teams play in a certain way. The way I read it, managers can also have a huge part in how a team plays. So I'm not sure if he can totally fob that off on the qualities of his players as opposed to the qualities of his previous players with his great teams.
Well, no, listen, in terms of the amount of money he's spent, he still, through his own admission, hasn't got a team in his image. But that's obvious. When you think about the successful teams of Mourinho, it's based on defensive structure. You can't rely on this defence, and that was why I felt maybe going into the game he might have thought attack was his best form of defence because he can't rely on them. That was proved yesterday. But you're right, and even in terms of that, and I saw his Inter Milan team play at Chelsea. It was incredible. But they had Samuel Eto'o, who was one of the best centre forwards in Europe, playing as a left back that day against Chelsea in terms of putting the shift in. So ultimately, what he's saying, and he's referenced this before this season, that he doesn't have the mad dogs. But this is the problem that he has. That these players are not willing to go right to the end of every ounce of energy that they have for him, and he's obviously cultivated that. That's the problem he has, and I think, unfortunately, now you're seeing the whole fallout from it, that ultimately doesn't look like he has that change room. I know he was asked the question yesterday. He wasn't particularly happy to be asked it, but he's very clever in putting the spin back on the reporter in terms of trying to word the question differently to how it was actually asked, which was ultimately, are these players playing for you? And I think you can see there that even the numbers, the sprints, the distances covered over the course of this season, I think United are down in about 15th, 16th place. I mean, that's not good enough. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah, what do you do if you're the hierarchy of the club at the moment? Do you sit and wait and try and get a manager at the end of the season and just accept that this is a lost season? Or do you rip the plaster off now and hope that whoever is available on the market at the moment is going to be the right player or right manager for this group of players?
Well, listen, I think you're quite right there, Jed, to suggest I think the decision and how quickly it would be made is who's available. Now, if suddenly Pochettino was available, I think they'd do it instantly. But that's not likely, and I think it's going to take an awful lot of negotiation, persuading to try and get Pochettino to go out there and take up Manchester United, which is obviously an iconic job, but it's a massive job now in terms of the mess that it's in. And I know a lot of people are saying that, well, listen, if you get rid of Mourinho, these players suddenly become top players. Listen, they're good players. Roy Keane suggested it yesterday, and I've always said this, but these are not Manchester United quality players. These are not the Manchester United quality that I would have faced in terms of that iconic team. They're nowhere near that level. And this is the frustration, is that I don't believe it's going to be a quick fix just on terms of the manager. If you get in someone like Pochettino, who they have obviously caught in, I think you're going to have to give him the opportunity to build something there, which he can do. He's a top manager, there's no doubt. But I'm fascinated to see where they go here, because if United are not in the Champions League, which looks highly unlikely, as you said, 11 points off it, I mean, that's a staggering fall from grace.
Unless, of course, they win the tournament. That could easily happen. We've seen stranger things happen in world football. Again, look, we tweeted out earlier on, is Jurgen Klopp already Liverpool success? And the answer is silverware, question mark, question mark, question mark. That's not why we watch football, right? Like, we don't watch football just for the trophy at the end of it. It's the games and it's the journey to get to that point. It's the excitement of seeing somebody like Xherdan Shaqiri come off the bench and be able to impact the game. That suddenly makes it worthwhile being a Liverpool fan, right?
Listen, he's done unbelievably, but you're quite right that he's won nothing other than the Liverpool supporters' hearts. And listen, that great feeling towards him will start to subside if it goes a couple of seasons without trophies, because this is Liverpool. Even in the times when I'm playing against them, they get nowhere near the Premier League title. They're still winning European Cups. This is the fact of the matter. And I think I love him. I think he's done a brilliant job. I think he's more than just the histrionics that you see and all the chest pumping and all that. I think he's a clever manager. He's evolved this Liverpool team. He gets them to a Champions League final, and he changes everything about them the next season in terms of the control that they've got. They solved the problems with Van Dijk. They brought in a goalkeeper. I know he made a mistake yesterday, but he's elevated the quality of this team. I think they're fabulous.
Yeah, even allowing for that error yesterday, Simon Hughes was saying on Twitter that, just to bring up the statistic again, that after 17 games, Liverpool have the joint best defensive record in Premier League history. The other team was Mourinho's Chelsea in 2005, 2006. It does, however, put it into context just how amazing Liverpool need to be for the rest of the season, because it's pretty close at the moment between themselves and Manchester City. They're putting down one of the best defensive performances so far we've ever seen in a Premier League season, and yet it is only a hair's breadth between them. Like, the thing is, and the way I see it is, if they can get through the next 6 weeks and they get Joe Gomez back fit, and if Trent Alexander-Arnold gets fit again, and they keep that defence then fit for the rest of the season, then they have a very, very good chance of keeping this defensive record up. But it is the key part about this, isn't it? They need to match that Jose 05-06 team right the way through to May if they're going to win the Premier League.
Yeah, listen, even up to this point, the front three haven't been firing as such. So that's changed over the last couple of weeks. And I expect them to get better. I think they're obviously, like Salah's getting over the injury. Obviously, a lot of players getting over World Cup as well. So they will be stronger in January. And if I'm right, I think you can now sign players in the window that have played Champions League football for the first time. I think that's a new ruling, is it, this week? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, if they can do that, that would be fascinating. But there's strength in depth. You've got to think about the players who are potentially coming back. The Lallana's, Oxlade-Chamberlain, whether or not he comes back this season, I don't know. But they've got that. And you're right. Listen, defensively, it's so key to winning a title. If they can do that, they need to. But the problem that they are facing is they're coming up probably against one of the greatest ever Manchester City teams.
One quick point about the Manchester United situation. Just it's not a quick fix. You do feel though that if they were to swap out Lukaku and Alexis Sanchez and cash in and Pogba, maybe cash in on those three players, that, plus whatever new money the next manager will get, they would be able to have the basis for a really strong team. If you add a couple of players into that, then they would suddenly appear to have strength and depth. And it's still Man United. Like, it's still one of the biggest clubs in the world. So it shouldn't be that despairing for the next manager.
No, it shouldn't be. But the only thing I will say about that is United now look to me like Liverpool in the early Premier League seasons in terms of trying to chase past glories. I think it's been a complete role reversal. And this is the problem that they have, United, is they're chopping and changing all the time in a similar way that Liverpool were trying to catch up with United back then. And this is the problem that you have. They need a clear strategy. I think even in terms of the likes of Gary Neville, Roy Keane, iconic players, highlighting that they're doing great on one side in terms of commercially, but they need a football man involved. And I don't know whether or not that's Neville trying to put himself forward again, as he often does. But certainly they do seem to be making mistakes in and around that. And the control that you'd expect a club like Manchester United to have over their manager. I know that Alex Ferguson ruled the roost there for so long, but nevertheless, you don't expect managers to be coming out with some of the comments that Jose Mourinho has been.
Now, there's all sorts of rumours about Mourinho's contract, that if they fail to qualify for the Champions League, the compensation that they would owe him will be massively less. Like if they drop out of the Champions League, and it could be up to like 7 million less. So it's also, for Man United, it's just money. Like whether or not they have to pay him or not pay him, or how much they have to pay him, it's largely irrelevant. It's like another tractor deal somewhere in Ukraine, and away you go. There's a banner around the side of the pitch, and they've made up most of that money in a couple of weeks. Especially if the new manager comes in and brings some kind of level of excitement, or can get the best out of Pogba. So, the money in the contract thing, I suppose that maybe we should stop focusing too much on that. It's whether or not they think he's the right man for the job, and it appears as if he's kind of already. You know those interviews that managers give immediately after they get sacked, where
you can sense it.
It's happening now in real time before our eyes.
Listen, United have got so much wealth. They're not going to be particularly bothered about paying him up as such. It's just whether or not what's the timing to do it. And at times you're looking at scenarios thinking, has Jose Mourinho identified an escape route to Real Madrid? Does he want to be put out of his misery as such? Some of the comments suggest that he has an ulterior motive in terms of what he's coming out with and such. And obviously you're taking on a player like Pogba, who's a huge commercial value to Manchester United. But I'd counter that by saying, even if a manager turns up, a new manager, do you genuinely believe that Pogba is the central midfielder that Manchester United usually have? That he's got that consistency? I'm not convinced he is.
No, me neither. How about your beloved Arsenal, Owen? How'd they get on the weekend? What happened?
The Klopp of the Alps did it again. We expected Hasenhüttl to come and shake things up, and shake things up he did. Like, to be fair, Gary, if you're looking at any team, and Granit Xhaka is a starting defender in that team, which he was yesterday, and I guess at this point we're starting to realise that Stefan Lichtsteiner as well, not exactly good at the art of defending in the year 2018. It's the same old Arsenal, very much going back, haunted by injuries, and I hate to use that as an excuse, but it is of vital importance that Unai Emery gets out there into the market and signs a number of defenders. But he's been on the record in the newspapers this morning saying January, it's probably not going to happen. This is a case where Arsenal limp to 5th place again, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a reality check there, but it's not something we haven't seen. Even on that brilliant unbeaten run, that defence is vulnerable. We've seen it before. Obviously, Koscielny coming in, you're thinking about Koscielny in terms of his quality prior to his injury, but he looks like he's struggling a little bit. But you can't concede those type of goals. Danny Ings scoring 2 headers in your 6-yard box. It's ridiculous. And they weren't even deep crosses. They're from not that far out, so you should be able to cope comfortably with that. But this just shows you, ultimately, what a good job that Emery has done, that he's managed to get the feel-good factor back at Arsenal with a group of defenders who are not actually good enough to play at that level, to be perfectly honest. And I think you're right. I don't think they'll fix the problem in January as such. I think you'll slowly but surely see Emery get the players he wants over a couple of transfer windows. And when he does, and I would trust his judgment, there's no doubt about that. But certainly that was a sobering performance by Arsenal yesterday after the euphoria of the Tottenham win.
Yeah, you can see on the screen there a pinned tweet from Arsenal basking in the afterglow of that unbeaten run, which is now over. August 25th to December 15th. Our unbeaten run may have ended today, but we go again on Wednesday, back to home, back to work. Of course, we're playing Spurs in the Carabao Cup this midweek. My question, Gary, is how big the bubble has been for Arsenal, because reality check is exactly how I would see it as well. That I suspected that this Arsenal run was a bit of a bubble, but how significant is the burst going to be? Is it a thing where it really is 2 seasons before they can really call themselves at home again in the top 4, or is it much more of a temporary thing that he can fix this with perhaps 1 or 2 additions that are kind of plasters in January, and maybe a little bit of luck with terms of fitness, and actually get that top 4 spot this season? Because I actually feel, and you kind of suggested it there, that it could be a couple of seasons before this project is finalised. And, you know, when it comes to football fans, the patience might not be there.
Yeah, listen, I think in terms of them challenging at the top for a title, I do think that will be a couple of seasons, but I think he'll fix it quicker than people believe over this interim period until he gets there as such, because he's a top manager, there's no doubt. And I think the very fact that people are saying about the bubbles burst, I don't think it's a case of like under Arsene Wenger. You can see the improvements. You can see what he's done to the midfield area, the likes of Torreira, the difference he's made. You can see the work rate of those front players in terms of how they're difficult to play through, how they make recovery runs to impact and try and force transitional turnovers and such like that. But he's done an absolutely fabulous job. And you have to understand the quality of that squad that he inherited. Yes, there's some stellar players, but there's some players who just do what they want. And suddenly now everyone has to sing off the same hymn sheet with him. And I've been so impressed with him. And I think the future does look very good for Arsenal.
Yeah, I do as well. I think that, I mean, if we just spool back 3 minutes to the conversation we were having about Liverpool, titles aren't everything, especially at the start of an era. Like, surely the Arsenal fans are looking at this going, this is a real team now, as opposed to what it has been over the last number of years, where you had a manager who would look at defence, look at goalkeeper, look at central midfield and go, they're all fine. That guy who throws the ball into the net, that guy who doesn't close down, and that guy who can't pass the ball. No, that's fine. I don't need them because I've got all these other things going on. Surely the Arsenal fans aren't overreacting to this crappy defeat, no?
I think the sense is to what... How much solidity can he actually place in that unbeaten run? Because I think that unbeaten run...
You want to put your finger in the wounds. You're doubting Thomas. Like, let me feel the flesh wound.
Well, exactly. I think there was a number of fortunate results in that unbeaten run.
No, there was loads. There was Arsenal, Everton at home, West Ham at home, where teams really should have been 1 or 2 goals up before half-time. It showed the quality of Emery in terms of problem-solving. I know you can counter that and say, well, why wasn't he doing it in the first half? But certainly at half-time, he was getting things right. They were winning so many games. The fitness levels had improved, which suggests that they're working harder on the training field than they ever did under Wenger. So I think Arsenal fans, a lot of them are singing, we've got our Arsenal back. And I keep saying, I'm not sure what that means, but nevertheless, they're proud of their team again. They understand that it is a work in progress, that it wasn't going to happen overnight. But certainly, even more than that, and in keeping with what is happening at United, is that it's not only Emery in terms of on the touchline, it's that backroom staff behind him, the people above him in terms of being football people, their recruitment, their understanding. And that's what people are saying that United are lacking. And it's important that they got that type of team in, because obviously the likes of Wenger leaves, and we saw it with Alex Ferguson leaving. But of course, Ferguson leaving, but one of the big things alongside that was David Gill left with him. And suddenly Gazidis leaves with Wenger, and you think, bloody hell, but they've got all those guys in place where it doesn't look like it's going to be that much of a problem.
Yeah, I wonder if Gazidis was actually part of the problem as well, because he replaces David Dean. And everybody goes back to the David Dean era at Arsenal and thinking, okay, that was when we had contacts all around Europe and could buy players and could finance deals and do all that kind of stuff. You want to talk about Hazard and De Bruyne? Well,
yeah, like 2 of the stand-up performers from the weekend as well. Like, we've spoken briefly about the title race there, and Kevin De Bruyne, you wonder what his role is going to be in this, because I don't know, going into that Chelsea-Manchester City game last week, which not a lot of us called as a Chelsea win before that, we kind of thought, it's amazing how Manchester City are actually keeping up the charge on the title challenge. They're actually leading the way without Kevin De Bruyne. Imagine when he comes back, they're going to absolutely coast home. Is there any suggestion now that Manchester City finally cement themselves at a level above last season's Manchester City if we take this moment onwards to the end of the season? If we take this alone, you look at Gabriel Jesus, he's moved his family to the UK and he scored at the weekend, Kevin De Bruyne coming back, that this actually could be a higher level again. It seems a weird thing to say when they're not even top of the table, Gary, but I would be very, very excited if I'm a City fan.
No, absolutely, I would agree with you. I think with every week, month, season, Manchester City are going to improve under Guardiola because he's so demanding. He just doesn't accept a certain plateau and then this is as good as it gets. He's always trying to improve. And you're right. Do you imagine how good City are and they haven't had their best player? Could any other team in the league cope without that? I don't think they could. And that just shows you the quality, not just that they have, but their manager in terms of getting the best out of players. Kevin De Bruyne now has had a couple of tough injuries, but what it has allowed him is to recover from what was a fatiguing season last year, the World Cup as well. So you can imagine him going into the new year when he heals, that he's going to be so much fresher. And I think that's the challenge that Liverpool have. As good as they are, that they've become with their summer signings, Manchester City have improved. And that's the problem that you're facing, is that they're just an incredible team.
Yeah, Mendy's out injured again for a couple of months still. He's been out for 3 weeks now. He's going to be out for another 2 months at least. Fabian Delph fits in at left back. Is this the one kind of area of weakness in the team that maybe the opposition are going to look at? And you say this and you think back to James Milner playing as a full-back for Liverpool, and actually he was really good. So maybe it's just a sign of a good manager being able to plug players in.
Well, yeah, listen, it's no surprise we're looking at weaknesses, and you're probably saying Delph at left back, but we used to say it all the time about Mascherano at centre half for Barcelona. The problem is you can't get the ball. That's the problem. They're so good in terms of retaining possession and enforcing it to get it back as well that you can't actually get at these weak links. But Mendy gives you that blistering pace on the outside. Delph more solid, more combative. But I think you just look at Guardiola and you just think that as much as any problems are put in front of him in terms of injuries, he's able to solve them. The only thing and the only player I genuinely feel they would really miss is the goalkeeper, because Bravo does not elevate that team the way that he does in terms of the way they want to play. They can't play out from the back as well, and as a result then they're a bit more vulnerable. But he's the only one in that squad I think is irreplaceable.
Yeah, we saw Seamus Coleman struggling that match, taken off around the hour mark. Is it kind of a sense that he's still trying to work his way back to top form, or is it just a matter that he gets to a point in his career where things start to level off a small bit? Because it seems that Manchester City had a good bit of joy on his side on Saturday. Yeah,
listen, you're creating overloads over there, and he was struggling. But I think you're right. I think you can heal from an injury, but it still takes you a long time to get over it, and that is like a mentally draining injury as well, a broken leg. So he obviously came back. He looked great. We were delighted for the Ireland team to have him in and around it again. But I think it levels off a little bit now, and he maybe is struggling a little bit. So, but he's a strong character. He's not one who will wilt away, and I've no doubt he'll get back to his usual consistent level.
All right, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, guys.